January 1968, thousands of American Marines were trapped at Khe Sanh, surrounded by a growing enemy force. Day and night, artillery hammered the base, while commanders feared another disaster like Dien Bien Phu. But was Khe Sanh really meant to be captured, or was the siege hiding a far larger plan? Khe Sanh stood near the Laotian border, where remote mountains concealed vital routes through the region. For American commanders, the isolated base offered a strategic position for monitoring enemy movements near the border. But beyond those hills, North Vietnamese forces were quietly increasing their presence around the isolated American position. Intelligence reports warned of growing enemy activity, yet the true scale of the buildup remained uncertain. Then, in January 1968, a sudden clash in the surrounding hills revealed just how dangerous Khe Sanh had become. Patrols around Khe Sanh encountered increasing resistance as enemy forces moved closer to the American defensive perimeter. On the surrounding hills, Marines fought to control high ground overlooking the increasingly vulnerable combat base below. Captured intelligence and battlefield reports suggested that larger North Vietnamese units were gathering throughout the surrounding region. Inside the base, Marines strengthened bunkers and defensive positions while preparing for an attack they believed was coming. Then, before dawn on January 21st, North Vietnamese artillery suddenly opened fire across the entire Khe Sanh base. From hidden positions in the hills, North Vietnamese artillery continued pounding Khe Sanh with deadly accuracy. Incoming shells struck without warning, forcing Marines to spend long hours inside cramped underground shelters. Every movement outside the bunkers carried risk as artillery observers searched constantly for targets across the base. American aircraft and artillery answered with overwhelming firepower, striking suspected enemy positions throughout the surrounding mountains. Yet despite the massive bombardment, enemy pressure continued, leaving American commanders uncertain about what would come next. The hills surrounding Khe Sanh became vital battlegrounds, offering commanding views over the vulnerable base below. North Vietnamese forces challenged these positions, turning steep jungle-covered slopes into dangerous close-range battlefields. Marines defending isolated hill positions depended on artillery and air support when enemy pressure became overwhelming. Fighting across the high ground became a brutal struggle for positions that could influence the entire battlefield. As battles raged around Khe Sanh, commanders feared the enemy might be preparing a much larger assault. American commanders strengthened defenses around Khe Sanh, convinced that a major enemy ground assault could begin at any moment. Night brought even greater tension as Marines watched the dark perimeter, expecting enemy troops to emerge without warning. Flares illuminated the darkness, while patrols searched beyond the wire for signs of an approaching enemy attack. Beyond American lines, North Vietnamese troops prepared concealed positions, while artillery crews maintained pressure against the surrounded base. With both sides preparing for escalation, Khe Sanh became the center of an increasingly intense battle of endurance. Day after day, artillery fire continued, forcing Marines to adapt their routines to life beneath constant bombardment. Sleep became difficult inside crowded bunkers, where every distant explosion warned that another barrage might be approaching. Food, ammunition, and medical supplies remained essential as the isolated garrison prepared for weeks of continued fighting. Wounded Marines required urgent treatment, while medical teams worked under the same relentless artillery, threatening everyone inside Khe Sanh. Despite exhaustion and constant shelling, the Marines continued holding their positions as the siege showed no sign of ending. Another heavy barrage struck Khe Sanh, forcing exhausted Marines back into bunkers as explosions erupted around them. Repeated shelling damaged defensive positions, forcing Marines to repair bunkers quickly between incoming enemy artillery attacks. The airstrip remained a vital lifeline, but every arriving transport aircraft faced the constant threat of enemy artillery. Ground crews rushed to unload essential supplies before exposed transport aircraft became targets for surrounding enemy guns. When conventional landings became too dangerous, American crews increasingly relied on rapid aerial delivery for essential supplies. Recovering supplies remained dangerous, forcing Marines across exposed ground while enemy artillery threatened nearby defensive positions. American reconnaissance searched the surrounding mountains for enemy artillery positions concealed beneath the dense jungle canopy. Once suspected positions were identified, American aircraft attacked rapidly to silence enemy guns threatening Khe Sanh, yet concealed artillery repeatedly resumed firing, revealing how difficult the mountainous terrain made effective American counterfire operations. The battle became a deadly cycle of bombardment and counterattack across the mountains surrounding isolated Khe Sanh. Weeks passed under relentless bombardment, yet Marines continued defending Khe Sanh despite mounting exhaustion and constant battlefield uncertainty. Rain turned defensive trenches into muddy obstacles, making every movement slower while conditions steadily worsened across the battlefield. Despite worsening conditions, supply aircraft continued risking dangerous missions to keep the isolated garrison prepared for battle. Every successful resupply mission strengthened the defenders, allowing essential ammunition, food, and medical supplies to reach Khe Sanh. Still, the surrounding mountains concealed enemy positions, leaving uncertainty hanging over every passing day inside Khe Sanh. American artillery crews remained constantly ready, responding whenever enemy guns opened fire from the surrounding concealed positions. Radar and observation teams helped direct counterfire, searching for enemy batteries hidden across the rugged mountainous terrain. Once coordinates were established, artillery and aircraft combined their firepower against suspected enemy positions threatening the besieged base. These massive strikes became central to defending Khe Sanh, disrupting enemy concentrations before they could threaten American positions. The expanding air campaign would soon become one of the defining features of the entire struggle for Khe Sanh. Operation Niagara combined aircraft, artillery, and intelligence to strike enemy forces gathering around Khe Sanh. Reconnaissance aircraft searched constantly for troop movements, supply routes, and artillery hidden beneath dense jungle. Reconnaissance intelligence helped commanders identify suspected concentrations and direct powerful strikes more effectively. Tactical aircraft repeatedly attacked suspected enemy positions across the mountains surrounding the isolated combat base. B-52 bombers then struck deeper targets, unleashing enormous firepower against suspected enemy concentrations near Khe Sanh. Wave after wave of airstrikes hammered suspected enemy positions, creating enormous pressure across the mountains surrounding Khe Sanh. The bombardment shook distant hills continuously, while Marines inside Khe Sanh watched smoke rising beyond their defensive perimeter. American artillery joined the attacks, maintaining constant fire against suspected routes and positions throughout the surrounding battlefield. For North Vietnamese forces, surviving this firepower required concealment, fortified positions, and careful movement through the mountainous terrain. Despite enormous American firepower, the siege continued, proving that Khe Sanh remained far from a settled battle. Day and night, American aircraft continued striking suspected enemy positions across the mountains surrounding Khe Sanh. Heavy bombardment devastated sections of the surrounding terrain, leaving shattered vegetation and deep impact craters behind. Yet surviving North Vietnamese units remained concealed, using trenches and underground positions to endure the bombardment. Whenever enemy artillery resumed firing, American forces answered quickly with coordinated artillery and airstrikes. Operation Niagara placed extraordinary firepower around Khe Sanh, but the siege still remained unresolved. Operation Niagara combined aircraft, artillery, and intelligence to strike enemy forces gathering around Khe Sanh. Reconnaissance aircraft searched constantly for troop movements, supply routes, and artillery hidden beneath dense jungle. Reconnaissance intelligence helped commanders identify suspected concentrations and direct powerful strikes more effectively. Tactical aircraft repeatedly attacked suspected enemy positions across the mountains surrounding the isolated combat base. B-52 bombers then struck deeper targets, unleashing enormous firepower against suspected enemy concentrations near Khe Sanh. Wave after wave of airstrikes hammered suspected enemy positions, creating enormous pressure across the mountains surrounding Khe Sanh. The bombardment shook distant hills continuously, While Marines inside Khe Sanh watched smoke rising beyond their defensive perimeter, American artillery joined the attacks, maintaining constant fire against suspected routes and positions throughout the surrounding battlefield. For North Vietnamese forces, surviving this firepower required concealment, fortified positions, and careful movement through the mountainous terrain. Despite enormous American firepower, the siege continued, proving that Khe Sanh remained far from a settled battle. Day and night, American aircraft continued striking suspected enemy positions across the mountains surrounding Khe Sanh. Heavy bombardment devastated sections of the surrounding terrain, leaving shattered vegetation and deep impact craters behind. Yet surviving North Vietnamese units remained concealed, using trenches and underground positions to endure the bombardment. Whenever enemy artillery resumed firing, American forces answered quickly with coordinated artillery and airstrikes. Operation Niagara placed extraordinary firepower around Khe Sanh, but the siege still remained unresolved. By March, American commanders saw signs that enemy pressure around Khe Sanh was beginning to gradually weaken. Enemy artillery still struck the base, but the relentless intensity of earlier bombardments was becoming less consistent. American patrols pushed farther beyond defensive lines, testing areas that had previously remained dangerous under enemy observation. Beyond Khe Sanh, preparations began for a major relief operation designed to reopen the land route toward the base. The coming offensive would combine ground troops, engineers, artillery, and helicopters in a determined advance toward isolated Khe Sanh. Engineers worked along Route 9, clearing obstacles and repairing damaged sections needed for the approaching relief forces. Helicopters carried troops into forward positions, expanding American control across terrain leading toward the surrounded combat base. Artillery positions advanced alongside the operation, providing protective fire as American forces moved deeper toward the Khe Sanh region. As relief forces approached, Marines at Khe Sanh sensed that weeks of isolation might finally be ending. Operation Pegasus was now ready to begin, launching the decisive ground advance intended to reach and relieve Khe Sanh. Operation Pegasus began as American ground forces advanced along Route 9 toward the isolated Khe Sanh Combat Base. Engineers cleared mines, repaired damaged roads, and removed obstacles slowing the relief column advancing toward Khe Sanh. North Vietnamese defenders resisted fiercely, forcing American forces into difficult firefights along the rugged jungle route toward Khe Sanh. Helicopters reinforced advancing troops, delivering supplies and evacuating casualties, despite continuing enemy resistance along Route 9. Each kilometer gained brought relief forces closer to Marines, who had defended Khe Sanh for nearly 3 exhausting months. American forces pushed westward along Route 9, securing key positions while helicopters expanded the advance across surrounding hills. Air cavalry units landed ahead of the road column, capturing strategic ground and opening new approaches toward Khe Sanh. Scattered enemy resistance continued along the advance, forcing American troops to secure each position before moving farther west. As resistance weakened, the relief force moved closer, and Khe Sanh finally appeared within reach through the mountains. Relief forces finally reached Khe Sanh, ending the base's isolation after weeks of bombardment, uncertainty, and exhausting defense. With the land route reopened, Khe Sanh was no longer isolated, but the battlefield revealed the siege's enormous cost. Despite surviving the siege, American forces later abandoned Khe Sanh, dismantling positions they had fought desperately to defend. That decision fueled lasting debate over Khe Sanh, its strategic importance, and what either side had truly achieved. Thousands endured the struggle around Khe Sanh, leaving casualties, shattered terrain, and memories that survived long after 1968. Khe Sanh endured 77 days of siege, becoming one of the Vietnam War's most remembered and debated battles.